Okay, wow, that's pretty cool. Never seen one of these things before. Yeah, thank you so much, Rod, for the introduction. Yeah, my name is Adam Reeder. I actually got given the nickname, the Professor of Rock, in my second interview that I did with the Beach Boys. They said, man, you know more about us than we do. If they gave like a degree as the Professor of Rock, you're the Professor of Rock. And the general manager of the news station that I started my show on, he's like, that's what we're going to call you, the Professor of Rock. So I get a little bit of trouble sometimes online where, how can you be the self-professed Professor of Rock? I'm like, hey, the Beach Boys gave me that kind of stuff. But anyway, I wanted to, thank you, Rod. Currently, when the pandemic hit, we decided to scrap everything we were doing. I mean, we've been trying to figure out how to, that's part of the fun of this story, is how to monetize this. It's great to interview a bunch of rock stars and have these great stories, and I've been doing this for 8 years, you know. My first interview was like a little over 8 years ago with Kenny Loggins, and Kenny was so gracious. It was supposed to be about a 10-minute interview, ended up going like an hour and a half because he wanted to keep going. And I fell into this. This was by accident. I've been the king of useless information since I was 4 years old. Grew up with music, grew up in a small town in Blackfoot, Idaho. My dad and I didn't get along on a lot of things, but music and baseball were the two things that really connected us, and music was number one. He used to tell me the stories of the songs as we would ride in his pickup truck around the little small town of Blackfoot. We'd stop and get a pop, and songs would come on classic radio, 60s, 70s. I love the 80s because that's the decade I grew up in, but he would tell me the stories of these songs, but he'd also connect them to his life and tell me, the first time I heard John Lennon, Imagine, I remember I bought the 8-track and I listened to it before I had to go and do my job at a grocery store. In high school, I worked at a grocery store, and I'll never forget hearing this song. It just expanded my mind, and he'd tell me these stories, and it got me excited to want to know the stories of the songs, and so I would go look up anything I could before the internet, of course. So I'd listen to Top 40 Countdown with Casey Kasem religiously. You guys remember that show? I loved it, and I'd write down the spots, the top 40, every spot, and it was really pretty cool how that worked. So anyway, currently where we're at, we decided when the pandemic hit to go on to YouTube. We had fought YouTube for a long time because we were kind of a little full of ourselves. We're like, I think our content's better than YouTube, But we tried to, with cable TV and with we had all these things going on to deal with Walmart, to be in all their stores and all these different things. Everything seemed to fall through. And so when the pandemic hit, we're like, we're not going to fight anymore. We're going to go onto YouTube. And it's just been crazy because I always thought, you're never going to be able to make any money on YouTube. How are you going to make money on YouTube? And amazingly, a year and 3 months after we had launched that channel, we're at 326,000 subscribers. We're the fastest growing music channel on YouTube. And we've got 5 million viewers a month, almost 2 million viewers a week, all over the world. And we're releasing a daily video. And so that's kind of where we are currently. It's really amazing when you see a message from somebody in Russia or a message from somebody in wherever, Africa, who say, I feel exactly like you do. I grew up exactly the same way, except for in Africa. That's what I'm saying. Is that music is truly the universal language. It doesn't matter who we are, where we come from. We are all connected. Music is one of the only things, there are a few, but there's one of the only things that connects all of us. And so I'll just give you a little bit of an idea of a few of the people we've interviewed. Here's a little promo here. It'll work, yeah.
is thicker than oil. It's like erosion cutting straight to the core. No human nature ever felt this before. And we become an unbreakable vow. I wanna hold you up higher than the earth, because it feels like flying and moving on islands out here on sirens, and so we wait, we wait.
Like everyone else says, this is the coolest interview I've ever done. Like, seriously, like the best.
You're a good interview, my man.
Oh, thank you.
Serious. I'll brag about you. I'll get you more business. Who do you want? I'll get them for you.
I consider you among the 3 best interviewers out there.
You're just a font of information. I don't even know some of this
That was
stuff.
like the best interview ever. That was great.
Oh, thanks, man.
You're good at this.
I think that's the best intro I've ever gotten.
Where are you? You've done research, boy, I'll tell you.
You know my career better than I do.
You're a walking encyclopedia. Incredible.
That was like therapy for me, man. I'm gonna go back and like meditate on what we
I
talked
love it,
about.
man.
You should be writing my book.
Yeah.
You really are the professor.
So yeah, so at this point, I've done about 600 interviews, and since the pandemic hit, I've been doing most of my interviews on Zoom. I've done like 80 interviews on Zoom. It's pretty cool, actually. It doesn't change too much. It's not 4K video, but yeah. So today, what I want to talk to you about is the power of music as the universal language. And I want to talk about it and if you guys can think of a better word for this, because you're teachers, you definitely know more than me on a word to use for this, but the 4 characteristics of the soul, I guess I would say, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and mentally, the 4 elements of human nature. I don't know what you would call it. You know what I'm saying, though. And how it motivates us and drives us and lifts us in those areas. First of all, kind of a funny little story. Before I was getting ready this morning to come, I had an AC/DC shirt on that said, "For those about to rock, we salute you." And my wife said, "You can't wear that. You're going to talk to a bunch of teachers? I'll throw you out of the place." So, I don't think so. AC/DC fans out there, anybody? You know, it's funny, when I was growing up, I heard in a small town all this music, Ozzy Osbourne and AC/DC, and a lot of these people that I've met and interviewed, this devil music, and it's just not true. You know, when what happened is the media slants things and they make things, you know, one of Ozzy Osbourne's biggest songs people think is satanic, and it's actually about the Cold War. So it's interesting. That's what's cool about sitting down with these musicians and delving into the stories of these songs and why they created them and what was behind them. And you start to get rid of a lot of myths out there that were more the media. Sometimes there's a marketing ploy, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, back to it. So my dream job, this is my dream job. I never knew that I wanted. You know, it kind of came by accident. Like I said, I happened to be in the office of the general manager of ABC4, and I had a small company that I was running. I had been in bands and things like that. And that's what I thought I wanted to do, was be a lead singer in a band. And we had some success, and we got offered a record deal right when the music industry was changing, and I knew I'd have to go out on the road for years, and I was just having my kids, and I didn't want to be away from them. So I started a business called Music for the Masses, and after a Depeche Mode album. And I had this business. It was a recording studio with a partner, and we were trying to help kids get into music, learn how to market themselves, how to record, and how to do it independently. And so I got called into this meeting with about 15 other companies, and he wanted to start a music show on ABC4 about local music, and he wanted to have us as potential sponsors. And so as he presented and talked about it, because he had just come from San Diego where he ran a Fox station, and they had this huge music show about local music. And I think Maroon 5 was the first gig they ever played when they weren't Maroon 5, they were a different band. But anyway, this was a very successful show for about 8 years. And he wanted to do it here. And I raised my hand about 30 minutes into the presentation. And I said, this all sounds great and everything, but in Utah, you're wanting to do about 36 episodes a year, an hour-long show each week. I don't know if there's enough bands in Utah to put on the show. Well, California, of course, is huge. So there's lots of bands, but so what if you were to get some of the touring groups or artists that come through Utah and do like an interview with them and use them as the headliner for the show, and then local music could be the backdrop, and you could do both, and it'd be a way to bring viewers in. And he's like, oh my gosh, I love that idea. He said, in fact, why don't you help me produce the show? I really like how your mind works. I mean, it went on and on and on. And he pulled me aside after and said, I'm serious about that. Why don't you help me produce? I've never produced a TV show. So we spent the next month trying to look for somebody to do the interviews. We interviewed people like DJs and, to host the show. And after about 7 or 8 interviews with different people, he looked at me and he said, why don't you host the show? He's like, you got this cool look, this fedora and band t-shirts and all this. And he's like, you know more about music than anybody I've ever seen, so let's try it. Let's do a first interview. Let's just do a test and see how you do. So my first interview was with Kenny Loggins, who's actually become a lifetime friend here. And like I said, about 15 minutes into the interview, he said, how have I never heard of you? Like, this is the best interview I've ever done. And I thought he told everybody that. So I didn't take it seriously at all. I just kept going on with the interview. But it was really cool because he kept saying things like, wow, how did you know that? And I just thought, gosh, he's the nicest guy, But then after it was over, he actually pulled me aside and said, I'm really serious about this. You have a gift. And we're losing artists every day, legends, who are passing away. We're losing that knowledge, those experiences that they had, and the songs that they wrote that changed the world. And, if you really go after this, I'll help you. I'll open doors for you. And he was a man of his word. By the next week, I had interviewed the Beach Boys, like I told you, and then the Doobie Brothers, and it just went on and on. And so we had this show on ABC, and it did really well. Luckily, one night the Oscars were on ABC, and that's the biggest night of the year for ABC locally. And people watch the newscast after, and they stay with. They hold on to about 80% of that Oscar audience in Utah. And luckily, my show was on after the newscast. We held on to most of that audience going forward after that. So we had actually bigger numbers than like Jimmy Kimmel sometimes, our little show that I was producing with one editor, and it taught me a lot about figuring this thing out, how to fill up an hour's worth of time. I mean, you have a 10-minute interview or an interview segment, and then you have maybe a local band, and you got to fill up 30 minutes more of the show. So I had to write, pop culture segments and things like that. And so that was a great education for me. So that's just a little bit about my story. And after that happened, I decided to go out and find some investors and make this a really big thing. And so 600 interviews later, and we're still, going strong. And it took us 8 years to figure out how to monetize it. So we're finally at that place. But as far as the power of music goes, jumping into that, according to recent data, music and musicians are the most followed, liked, and shared content in all of social media. It makes up almost 70%. That's more than actors, politicians, athletes, religious figures. If you add that to video, it's almost unbeatable because video traffic accounts for over 80% of all consumer internet traffic. It's just going to continue to rise. And so I thought, music and video together, that could really pack a punch. I really believe, like I said before, that music is truly the universal language. It's the thread that weaves every facet of our civilization together. It's the supreme instigator of sweeping social change, as we've seen. In times of resignation, music creates a revolution within our ears, you know, and they're checkpoints, hallmarks of our history, both universal history and our own personal history. I mean, how many of you have heard a song and it takes you right back to a moment? You know, there's really nothing else that does that. Smells do that, scents, but you don't have an iPod that can, you know, give you that. That would be cool, though. If somebody could figure out an iPod that could, like, give you a smell for something, that person would be a trillionaire, probably. But songs are a time machine, and they take us back at every listen to memories that we yearn to experience over and over again. And so music is a universal language, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. So let's start with mentally. In terms of memory, music in relation to history, personal and universal. I want to show you a clip that I did, an interview with Heart, the band Heart, and there's a few others, Johnny Mathis. And they share in this how music has been part of where the two come together, converge. Personal history and universal history, what's happening around us. Let me display that here.
Like so many musicians of my generation, it was seeing the Beatles play on Ed Sullivan. And that was really the moment when the light bulb went on and it just opened up the tops of everyone's heads to the possibility of what could be. But I think it was different in the case of myself and my sister because we wanted to do it. We didn't just want to be the girlfriends of the Beatles. We wanted to go out and be the Beatles and be the experience.
When I found Nirvana, it hit me so hard. It changed my life.
Yeah, it was kind of like our Ed Sullivan moment, right?
It was like that scene from Wizard of Oz where suddenly just the world is in color.
Yeah.
I was a completely different human after that.
My religion is music. I really do, have such a respect and love and admiration for what I get to do.
Well, I believe that God is music, you know? So when you make music, that's God talking to you.
One day my dad came to our little basement flat in San Francisco with a bunch of, I thought it was wood, planks and things, and he put it together, and in the middle of the night, or maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, for the first time, my brothers and sisters and I heard the piano played. Dad worked all day like Mom did, and he was in his work clothes. He was a painter. He painted people's houses, and he was all with his paint stuff on, and he was putting this stuff together, and it took a long time, and we all went to bed, and we were awakened by this sound that we'd never heard playing the piano. We don't have a piano.
Yeah.
Well, we did then. We never knew that Dad could play the piano, and that was the genesis of my music. From that time on, I sat by my father's knee and listened to him play the piano and sing songs. And over the years, I think I've recorded everything that Pop ever sang for music. Yeah, at that point.
Wow.
So that's how it all started.
So I love that because it's Ann Wilson and Nancy Wilson seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. You know, my dad told me his story of seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. And I'm sure that many of you have heard those stories of either your parents or yourselves have experienced that moment. It was such a huge moment because if you remember, I wasn't alive, of course. I just know that from secondhand experience of interviewing people and hearing these stories. But of course, John F. Kennedy had been assassinated in November of 1963, and then the Beatles came right after that, and it really did heal the nation in a way because it was such a tragedy when JFK was assassinated, and when the Beatles came, it just started a revolution overnight, and not only with the experience that people have hearing the Beatles and buying their records, but tell you that 80% of the interviews I've done, I ask a question at the very beginning. I always ask them, what was the moment that kicked open the door to your mind and made you want to pursue music? You know, one moment. And 80% of musicians have told me it was the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. You know, the next day they started a rock band. And if you think about it, if that moment had never happened, where would music be right now? Where would culture be? I mean, that's how big of an impact that music had to heal our nation and to start thousands of bands of some of the biggest artists. I mean, half the artists are, you know, that you saw in that thing, Def Leppard and REO Speedwagon and all these huge bands, AC/DC, all of them. It all started from seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. You know, so that's kind of universal and personal history coming together. And then, of course, the civil rights movement. You know, I've had the opportunity to interview a lot of members of Motown's groups, Springs and Four Tops, and people who have written Marvin Gaye's songs and Stevie Wonder's, and they've all told me about the impact that had on the civil rights movement, and they didn't even know it would. You know, Berry Gordy, who owned Motown, his whole goal was to create music for everybody. It wasn't about creating music for black people or for white people or whatever. It was about, we want to create music that everybody will listen to. And they had no idea that they were setting up the blueprint to push the civil rights movement forward. But because he wrote music for everybody, I think that was the result, you know, from that. And as we move along, remember interviewing the Animals and the Byrds and so many bands. Crosby, Stills and Nash when Vietnam was happening, and the shooting at Kent State, and getting those personal stories of writing songs that could shake the world and change things. And you know, when the Animals did "We Got to Get Out of This Place," they didn't know that it would become "We Got to Get Out of This Place." They were recording a song that was written by a couple, actually a married couple that I had the opportunity to interview as well. They wrote "You've Lost That Love and Feeling," and they live in the biggest house I've ever seen in Beverly Hills. And they tell me that this is the house that "You've Lost That Love and Feeling" built. Because that's the most played song of the 20th century, believe it or not. But they wrote "We Got to Get Out of This Place," and they shared a really cool story about how they got a letter from a bunch of veterans who said, it was signed by hundreds of veterans, who said that your song, "We Got to Get Out of This Place," is the song that has healed us coming back from Vietnam as vets. We get together every year and we come together in a circle and put our arms around each other and we sing that song, every lyric of that song. And thank you so much for that music. And so just a few examples of that. And I just talked about a video when I was in school, to show you how much music can impact teaching. I remember when the Berlin Wall came down. Does anybody remember the big song that was for the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Berlin Wall? It was all over radio. Anybody remember that?
Scorpions, Wind of Change.
You got it. Who said that? Scorpions, Wind of Change, yep. I just told a story about it. They actually just released a podcast where they were trying to argue that the CIA actually wrote the song to try to bring down the wall. Not true. But but yeah, Scorpions, I've been able to interview the guitarist of Scorpions. And what's amazing about Scorpions writing that song is that he played a concert. They played a concert behind the Iron Curtain, and they saw that. And this was, you know, the year before the wall came down, and they were writing it as this was happening because they were seeing it when they were in this concert. It was a huge heavy metal concert. There were a lot of other bands that were involved. Bon Jovi was there, and Motley Crue, and they were one of them. But they saw the impact that music was having, even with the soldiers. You know, the soldiers were even rocking out, you know. And so he saw that there was a wind of change that was happening. But what was amazing is I remember when that was happening and that song was on, our teacher played that song. And that had more of an impact for me to understand the feelings that I felt and understood about these people being freed from having this wall and this wall coming down, more than any history lesson could. That's the impact and the power of music, I feel. And then another one I want to share is with the 20th anniversary of the tragedy, September 11th, coming up on us. And everybody remembers where they were when the buildings were coming down and how horrible and tragic that was. I did an interview with a man named John Andrasik, who is the lead singer of Five for Fighting. I don't like I do like Five for Fighting now, but at the time, I didn't like Five for Fighting. We all have our musical preferences, right? And I don't know why, but his music always annoyed me. But somebody offered me the opportunity to interview him, and begrudgingly I did it. And I got to know him, and he was an amazing person. One of the most amazing people I've ever interviewed. Just a great human being. And it changed my feeling about his music. Now I love his music. Isn't that interesting how that, a lot of my people that work in my camera crew, that happens to them. You know, I've got a guy that's a total punk rocker, and he's like, you know, every interview without fail, he'll say, he works the camera, and he's like, oh, I don't want to film this interview. Why are you going to interview Air Supply, man? You know? I interview everybody, but, you know, I was like, well, you know, they had some good songs. He's like, no, dude, they didn't have any good songs. And then after the interview's over, he's like, dude, I'm going to listen to some Air Supply, man. Those guys are cool, you know? That, you know, the human element, of course, but one story that John Andrasik shared, and then I'll move on to the next element. September 11th happened, Superman was on radio, getting a lot of radio play, and it resonated with people during that moment that the buildings came down because of the lyrics. And he said that he got invited to play this concert in New York, okay? Paul McCartney was playing, Billy Joel was playing, Bruce Springsteen, you know, all these legends. And he was like, I don't belong here. I'm really nervous to do this concert. All my heroes are playing this concert, and I'm like one of the main guys that is going to play because they want me to play the Superman song. So he was really nervous, and he said, the whole time I felt like I don't belong here. I don't know if I should do this, but I did it because I wanted to sing this song for New Yorkers. And he got on stage, and the whole time he was, you know, fearful leading up to this point. He puts his ears in, and he calls them his ears, but his earpieces to hear the band, and everything goes silent. He can't hear his band. And he thinks, I already don't feel like I belong here, and now I can't even hear my band, so I'm done. I'm finished. My career is over. And he said that the song started, and all the fear was just swept away. He just felt light come in. And he said that all of a sudden I looked out, you know, something tell me, look out to the audience. I looked out to the audience, and he said, even though I didn't know what I was singing, I couldn't hear anything, the entire audience was singing every word of my song. And I could see these big, you know, these big burly firefighters and policemen, you know, who had a huge beer in one hand, who were just tears running down their face, just singing my song. And he said, everything left me, all the fear left me, and I was like, this is their song. You know, and he said, I just forgot all about it. It was the greatest moment of my life. And he said, I realized it's not about the money, it's not about the fame, it's not about the #1 hits. It's about the way that the second I released the song, I was just interviewing somebody yesterday who said this, the guy who wrote The Freshman, remember the Verve Pipe? He said, I believe this, and a lot of musicians believe this. The second that they release that song, that's not their song anymore. It belongs to everybody else. And I love that. I think that's so wonderful. So again, mentally, the way it has to do with memory and the way that it helps us deal with those things, leading into emotionally. So emotionally, music, especially for people writing the music, it's a way for them, it's an outlet for them to write about despair and about joy and about the things. And when they write that, it seems like, have you ever listened to a song where you're like, oh my gosh, this is my song, he wrote this just for me. How many of you guys have ever felt that way? Raise your hands. Because I've definitely felt that way. And I want to share just a quick clip. I was interviewing a guy named Perry Farrell from Jane's Addiction. And they were a pretty controversial band when they first came out. But there was a really incredible moment that came where he was talking about his mother and about what this song meant to him. So, share this.
There was a part, cash in now, honey, cash in Miss Smith. Miss Smith is my mother. Her last name was Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Cashing in was she cashed in her life. So,
yeah,
it's, you know, she decided that to her, at that time, she was desperate. Life wasn't worth it for her. That was her opinion. So, some people think, you know, never take your life. And some people find that their life isn't worth living. She was in love with my dad, and, you know, my dad was not faithful to her. And it broke her heart. and she was very desperate, and she did something that I know she regrets, but nonetheless, that was her choice.
In that interview, that was a really emotional moment where he really shared his feelings of losing his mother. And there's so many songs that are like that. Just yesterday, like I was telling you, I was interviewing the lead singer of a band called the Verve Pipe, the Freshman, and he explained to me an experience that he had in his life that he just had to write. He had to write it down. He had to get it out. And he said that there were so many times where he second-guessed himself. I don't think I should release this song. It's too personal. There's too much of me in it, and he did. And he said, I can't tell you how many letters, how many people have come up to me and said, that song changed my life. That song, resonated with me. And so emotionally, music can, from joy to sorrow, it can make up the difference for us. It really can. Physically, let's talk about physically music. I mean, how many people listen to a playlist when they're working out? Raise your hands. I know there's a lot of people that do that. Enter Sandman. I'm a big Yankees fan. And I remember back when they were winning all those World Series, they've gotten better as of late. They were pretty crappy here for the first part of the year. But I used to watch them when Mariano Rivera was their closer. He was the greatest closer of all time. I mean, when he got in the game, it was pretty much 99.9% of the time shut the door. I mean, it was over. And when he would come out, they always played Enter Sandman by Metallica. That was his song to get him pumped up. In fact, one of the times that he gave up the game-winning home run to lose the World Series, they didn't play Enter Sandman. So that was the difference, I think. But Thunderstruck, how many times do they play AC/DC Thunderstruck at a football game and it just rocks the stadium, it gets everybody pumped. I've got kind of two funny stories about, one serious story, one funny story. The funny story is that last year my wife and I were getting ready to move. And we sold our home and we had to get out. We bought another home. We're moving pretty far away from where we were. And I was really sick. I thought I had COVID, but I didn't have COVID. But I was very, very sick. I had a sinus infection and I could not even lift my head. And my poor wife had to pack the house because I couldn't even get out of bed. I was just so sick. And she asked me, this was kind of at the end toward where I was getting a little bit better. She said, honey, will you just help me? So we're trying to prepare the house. Actually, I think it was before we sold it. I think we were getting ready for people at an open house to walk through. So she had to get everything ready. And she said, honey, will you just do one favor for me? Will you switch out the light bulbs in our bedroom, right above our bed? I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I mean, she'd done everything else. I'm like, I can do that. So I get up and I'm trying to reach up to do light bulbs, and I just faint because I'm so sick. I can't do it. I mean, I didn't faint, but I couldn't find the strength to do it. And so I got my playlist out. I played Eye of the Tiger, Survivor. That song, since I was a little kid, could always motivate me to do anything. And somehow that song willed me to change those two light bulbs. When I was done, I felt like I'd taken a shower. I was sweating. But man, I had the guts, had the glory. So anyway, but another really cool story about a song that everybody plays, Don't Stop Believing by Journey. I had the opportunity to interview Journey many times. I actually become really good friends with the guitarist Journey. But first time I interviewed them, they were coming to Utah. And I wanted to do a contest. I went on ABC, and it was like a week before the concert. And I said, share your memories of Don't Stop Believing. How has this song saved you or changed your life or motivated you? Just share a short clip or a short story, and we'll pick a winner. And whoever won the contest got to see Journey, first row, get to meet them and get backstage and all that. So we got overnight like 1,500 stories. I was blown away. I didn't think we'd get that many. And most of them were like, hey, I love you. I love Don't Stop Believing. It reminds me of high school or this or that. But we got about 10 phenomenal stories that I could not believe. And the runner-up, we actually decided to give more prizes because there were so many great stories, but the runner-up was a guy who had served in Iraq, and his best friend died in his arms, and he had PTSD, got back, he lost his child because he started doing drugs because of the PTSD, he became addicted to heroin and other drugs, and he became homeless, lost everything. And he told me that he was walking out on the street one day and a pickup truck drove by and it was playing Don't Stop Believin', and he heard that song, and all of a sudden he just had this moment where he's like, I have got to turn my life around. I've got to change my life right now. And he did that. He checked himself into a VA hospital and he changed his life. He went back to school, he got his child back, he got remarried, and became an amazing success from what he was. And that was really, really an incredible story. The story that won, there was this lady named Elizabeth that's from Milwaukee, and she had MS. And she's about 49 years old, and she had a seizure and went into a coma. And the doctors basically told her family that there was no brain activity and that she was gone. There was nothing that they could do for her. She was on life support. Her daughters from Utah flew out to Milwaukee to basically say goodbye to her and to basically take her off life support. And for some reason, one of her daughters thought, I'm going to put headphones in her ears and play Don't Stop Believin', because they had done an MS walk for 5 years before that to raise awareness and money for MS. And that was their theme, was Don't Stop Believin'. She loved Journey, it was her favorite band. So she puts headphones in her mother's ears, and within about 30 seconds, her toes started moving, started tapping. And within a couple of days, brain activity came back. She came out of the coma within a week, and she pretty much only lost about 7 to 10% of her brain function. She can still speak and walk and talk and everything. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is the most incredible story I've ever heard. You know, these are the kind of stories that they script in Hollywood, you know. It was a true story. We flew her out, she got to meet the band, and it was the most incredible experience. They dedicated Don't Stop Believin' to her, and I was just sitting there in the front row with her, and you know, just tears streaming down as I saw her and watched this. It's just an amazing moment. And so, you know, physically, and that's kind of all of them. It's just that was able to do that. And I've heard so many studies with Alzheimer's patients and everything where music can bring them back. So that's how powerful that is. And then last of all, spiritually, Carlos Santana, when I interviewed him, I felt like I was interviewing a guru. You know, this guy is incredible. Not only is he one of the greatest guitar players ever, but he is just a fountain of knowledge. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. I want to share that with you here. Let's see, there it is.
Every person is born with an inner and outer support system. And they're more than anxious and willing with enthusiasm to open doors for you. You know, I like reaffirming to artists working out in the garage right now, man, don't worry about the support system. It's going to come. In fact, it's already there. They're waiting for you to get your own fingerprints together. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody has their own identity, individuality, and uniqueness. So don't use so many pedals, because then you're going to lose that immediately. You know, just plug into the damn amplifier and trust that you are the sound. Believe me, I'm a testament of like, it happens in abundance. Like my day don't start at all, man. No matter what I do, whether I drink coffee or brush my teeth or take a cold shower, the day don't start until I say, "Thank you, God." That's when it starts for me, and I go, because I feel an energy in my body going, "Oh, he deferred to God," instead of me, the ego, being in control. Because the ego is very, very controlling, domineering, and all of it has to do with fear. When you have trust, you get thrust, velocity, and traction. And when you don't trust nobody, you're crawling.
I love that. He's a very spiritual guy, and spiritually, music, it doesn't matter what our religion is. Music can be that spirituality that can draw us together. You know, I was telling you at the beginning of this that my dad, everybody has always asked me throughout the years, the question I get the most is, what's your favorite interview that you've ever done? You know, is it Carlos Santana? Is it, you know, you've done so many cool interviews, which is number one on your list? And actually, my favorite interview of all time that I've ever done is with my dad. I actually went down to Idaho, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago with the camera crew, and I did an interview with my dad about how we shared music and that bond, and he told some stories, and I want to end on that clip I'll show you in just a second, but music is what brought us together. Well, my dad passed away about 2 years ago. 2 years ago last week, actually. And it's been hard. It's been hard, especially through the trying times that we've had, because the person's advice that I want most is my dad, and he's not there, but he is there, actually, because there have been so many experiences that we had with music where when I hear that song, I'm right back there with my dad. My dad has given me advice through music, and as teachers, you guys have such a great opportunity. Actually, my dream job is to be a teacher. It's kind of tied with this dream job. I would love to be a teacher. I had some amazing teachers. I also had some really bad teachers. I had a teacher that called me the king of useless information. He'd call me out in class all the time and embarrass me and say, "This is Adam Reeder, the king of useless information. He'll never use anything that he's studying, that he's wasting his time on." And I love it because I use it every day, you know. So to heck with him. But you know, luckily I was one of those kids that negativity motivated me, where I said, heck with you, I'll show you. A lot of kids aren't like that. A lot of kids will believe what you tell them. And so I felt like, especially being a parent, that words are powerful. And encouragement is paramount. I remember a second grade teacher I had, Vinalee Belknap. She's passed away. But she was an amazing teacher. And she took some of the things that I loved, because I was a weird kid. I loved presidents, the presidents of the United States when I was in second grade. I memorized every president. I could tell you who they were married to, the terms that they served, what happened during their presidency. And I memorized the Gettysburg Address, and I did it for a talent show, and I won the talent show, and all the kids on the playground thought I was the biggest nerd. But she was awesome. She really understood that that was something I had, and she would always have something new for me. I'd come into school, and at my desk she'd have some flashcards of the presidents of the U.S. that she'd bought for me. You know, and she would encourage me all the time. You can do anything you want. And my grandma was like that. She would tell me all the time, you can do anything you want. And the reason I bring that up, it's a little off track from the music part of it, is that encouragement is so important. And I've had so many mentors in my life that have set the elevator back down, as I say, and bring me up. You know, they can see that, hey, I've already made it to the top, and I want to help you out. And that's the most amazing thing. Kenny Loggins is a great example of that. This is a guy that didn't have to take the time with me. He didn't have to take the time to pull me aside and set up other interviews. And over the last 8 years, he's done so many things to help me. And so that's really important. For you to be that mentor to even one kid, you know, or 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, they say, yep, that teacher changed my life. That is so powerful. You know, and so, so really I want to end with spirituality, is that the music being a spiritual connection with my dad, even though he's gone, he's not gone. I have that through music. And I think what the young lady said before me was incredible about gratitude. And that's actually how I end every interview I do. I ask them, what are you most grateful for? Because I think that gratitude is so important. It's the difference between really succeeding in life and not, is that even if you're at the very top of your profession, if you don't have gratitude, you're a failure, in my opinion. I think gratitude is so, so important. And so to end on, one of the mantras that I live by, that I think music has brought out in me, And it was interesting because it's always been my favorite lyric from a song. There's a song that I found. It's an artist that not a lot of people know. His name is Bruce Cockburn. He's a Canadian artist, and people call him the Canadian Bob Dylan. But he has a song called Lovers in a Dangerous Time. And he wrote it in 1984, but it's like a prophetic song because it speaks to the day that we live in right now. And there's one lyric at the very end of the song, the way he ends the song, it's so powerful that actually U2 reused it in one of their songs and gave credit to him. I heard the guy on the radio say this, but what the saying is, and it's my mantra that I live by, is nothing worth having comes without some kind of fight. You got to kick at the darkness until it bleeds daylight. I think that is so powerful, that imagery. You got to kick at the darkness until it bleeds daylight. Light is so important, and great music can do that. We as teachers, our encouragement can do that, or we as teachers, you as teachers. I'm just a fake professor. I didn't go to a day of college. That's what's funny about it. That's what I find funny about that nickname. But to end on, I just want to show you one thing. When I talk about my favorite interview of all time being my dad, is because I can go back to this interview, this 45-minute interview I did with my dad, and he can still give me advice through this interview. I'm so grateful that I have that interview that I did with him. But there was an experience that we had that I want to end on, where my dad, geez, how long ago was it, honey? Was it, she would remember this a little better than me. Again, I can remember all the lyrics from like any 80s song, but I can't remember the shopping list of the 5 items my wife needs me to get at the store. But when was the Paul McCartney concert that we went to at Rio Tinto? I think it was 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
10, 11 years ago. So Paul McCartney came, I don't know if you remember when he came to Rio Tinto. He doesn't come to Utah very often. I remember that I had a lot of stuff happening with work at that time, and I was slow getting tickets, and it was sold out. And my dad's favorite artist of all time is Paul McCartney. And I wanted to get tickets really bad. And so I called up a scalper, or a ticket, whatever, and the tickets were like $250 a piece, I think. So it's going to get like $1,000 for these 4 tickets for my mom, Leslie and I to take my mom and dad. And I remember I hesitated for a minute because I thought, I don't really have time to go to the concert, and everything's crazy right now, and it's really expensive. But something willed me to do that. Now, this will be a great experience that we can remember for a long time. So I took my dad to this concert, and I can tell you right now, so grateful that I did that. And I want to share that clip with you to end on. Oh, let's see, where'd it go? There it is.
Who's your favorite? You always tell me your favorite artist of all time.
Probably Paul McCartney.
Yep.
We got to go to the concert. You took me.
Yeah. And that was a cool experience.
That was one of the best experiences of my life.
So, that always makes me emotional because that was so worth it to be able to do that, to be able to sit there with my dad and to watch him during that concert. The joy and the pain and all the emotions that he went through hearing all those songs. You know Paul McCartney, he plays like 40 songs, you know. And one of the last songs he plays is Live and Let Die, and the fireworks are going off, and he's in full voice, and he's an alien. I was telling my wife the other day, I think that Paul McCartney is an alien. There's no way that at 70-something years of age you can do that like that. But that was the cool part of that, is watching my dad relive his life, seeing his life just through his emotions of all the songs that I grew up and all the stories he had told me. So that is why music is so important, and the power that it truly has to bring us all together in the most divisive time in the history of the world. That's what I love, is that all of these people, whether you're Democrat or Republican or black or white or whatever it is that the world is trying to divide us on, when you put all of these different people at a concert, like Paul McCartney, every single one of them is singing the same song. So as we I encourage us all to use that power of music to find common ground. So, thank you very much.